Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back. We're so glad that you're here this morning. We've been talking about the life of David. Last week, we talked about a couple that he met. He met Nabal and Abigail. How were you this last week? Did you act more like Nabal? Were you unkind to people around you? Or did you act like Abigail? Did you show them kindness? I hope this week you were more like Abigail. Well, last week, that was in 1 Samuel 25. This week, we're moving on to chapter 26. I'm going to read to you verse 2. Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Where we pick it up, boys and girls, Saul is on the chase of David again. He is going after David. He is going to catch David. If you remember, we've been talking about this, and we already had where David had a chance to kill Saul in a cave, and yet he didn't. All he did was cut a piece off his robe. Similar story, but a little bit different. We find ourselves with Saul chasing David again. And David is nearby once again. Well, nighttime comes. Saul goes to sleep. Abner, who's one of his chief soldiers, he goes to sleep. All the men around Saul are sleeping. And David looks at his men around him and he says, is there a volunteer? Is there someone who will go with me to sneak down into the camp where Saul is? And one man says, I'll go. That man's name is Abishai. So Abishai and David, they tiptoe. They sneak in nice and quiet. They see Saul sleeping. And Abishai, he's like, let's kill him. Let's get him. And David's like, oh no, we're not going to kill him. But David sees next to Saul that Saul has his spear, and Saul has, the Bible calls it a cruse of water. Okay, so a container of water. And David takes the spear. David takes the cruse of water, and then they sneak back out of the camp. The Bible does tell us that God had sent a great sleep over Saul and over Abner and those who were there. So they were quite asleep, boys and girls. God protected David. God constantly was looking out for David. God was watching over David because God had a special plan for David. Boys and girls, God has a special plan for you. You may not know it yet. Okay, but God has something in store for you, and he's watching over you. Boys and girls, God never goes to sleep. He caused Saul to go to sleep, but God never goes to sleep. He has a plan. While David, he sneaks away with Abishai, and they get back to where they are. And then David gets far enough away, and he shouts down into the camp where Saul is, and they all wake up. They're like, wait, what happened? You ever wake out of that deep sleep, boys and girls, and you're not sure what day of the week it is? You're not sure if you should be getting ready for school or church, or it's Saturday and you get to sleep. I've had a few of those sleeps recently. One day this last week, my mom had to knock on the door and wake me up for school. Yeah, I was out. Good thing my mom was there. But David, he shouts down, and Abner wakes up, and he's like, whoa, what happened? Because Abner's supposed to be guarding Saul. Abner's not supposed to be sleeping. Abner's fallen asleep on the job, and this is not good for him. Not supposed to happen. So David shouts down, and the people are like, wait, who's calling? Who's shouting? And David points out that he's got the spear. He's got the cruse of water. And Abner knows. Oh, man. David, the enemy of Saul, has come that close to Saul. Well, they were all sleeping. He had the opportunity to kill Saul. Boys and girls, did David kill Saul? No. Why didn't David? I mean, that's his enemy. That's the man who's seeking his life. Why didn't David kill Saul? Because Saul was God's anointed. Saul was the one that God had anointed as king, and David said, it's not for me to touch Saul. It's not for me to kill Saul. Well, in verse number 23, I wanted to read that to you. 1 Samuel 26. The Lord render to every man his righteousness and faithfulness, for the Lord delivered thee into my hand today, but I would not stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. So David is talking, he's shouting out to King Saul, and he says, God delivered me right into your hand, but I didn't kill you because that wasn't God's plan. Boys and girls, over and over, we find that David chooses wisely. Well, Saul is so focused on killing David. And yet David chooses wisely. We mentioned it last week with being kind. You reap what you sow, boys and girls. Always remember that. If you sow good works, you're going to reap good works. If you sow evil, you'll reap evil. Boys and girls, treat others the way that you want to be treated. David was protected by God. We see that over and over. We know he was protected when a sheep attacked him, or not a sheep. He was watching the sheep, and a bear came and a lion came, and then he fought Goliath, and Saul has tried to kill him multiple times, throwing spears and javelins at him. And God has protected David. God has a special plan for David. And boys and girls, God has a special plan for you. Will you obey his word this week? Will you talk to him? Will you listen to what God has to say to you today in church? When you go to junior church, you go to the auditorium for the morning service, will you listen to what God has to say? Will you follow him? Or are you going to try to do things your own way? Saul tried to do things his own way, and boys and girls, it didn't turn out well. I hope you'll live more like David and follow what God has and do what God has for you.